a Chinese research vessel that has entered Indian Ocean and in 17 days will be docked in Maldives. Despite India's concerns around this Chinese vessel, India-Maldives relations have hit choppy waters since the election of a new Maldivian president, Mohamed Muizzu, last year, whose election campaign was largely pegged around India out pitch. And this Chinese research vessel signals a new challenge for India, as Maldives is seen increasingly cozying to China. Amid the row, where the Maldivian minister called PM Modi names that soon spiraled into hashtag boycott Maldives. Maldivian President Muizzu asked China to send more tourists. And remember, the red carpet China first visit by Muizzu was a deviation in itself from the usual India first visit by his predecessors, but not the first such deviation in Maldives history. Though honestly, it wasn't China first, it was Turkey first. However, between India and China, it was China first. But what is India's objection to the Chinese vessel or the research vessel? India and even the US have repeatedly raised concerns over this non-military research vessel's survey being used for military purposes. And of course, adding to the complexities, Maldives recently refused to revive the hydrographic survey treaty with India. Remember, these surveys are not just maritime information for civil use, but the information could also be used for military purposes. Maldives stated national interest and security concerns, but no such concern with the Chinese research vessel in its backyard, is it? We'll try and understand what really is this all about and how much of a factor is China. I'm being joined right now by Captain Kapil Dev, President, the Nautical Institute, Major General Dhruv Katoch, who's the Director, India Foundation, Ashok Sajjanar, who's a former ambassador, and Maroof Raza, consulting editor for the Times Network. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. Well, first, let me just move over to Ashok Sajjanar. Sir, this isn't really a first such sticky point that's emerging. Just about in, say, less than 6 months, there seems to be some solid 3-4 sticky points between India and Maldives already. How problematic is this?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your show. Yes, you are very right. I think it is the election of the government led by Mr. Muizzu that is a problematic point. As you mentioned yourself, Muizzu came to power on the back of his India Out campaign. So right from the word go, he has started on that. But I think in addition to that, the fact that, as I think you also mentioned, that normally the practice has been for Maldivian leaders, Maldivian presidents, to first come to India after they get elected. But here the president first went to Turkey. Then, of course, there was a visit also to Dubai for the COP28, and after that to China. So there is a huge Islamist element also as far as the Maldivian society is concerned, and Turkey is trying to fish in troubled waters and trying to engage with one of the neighbors it is already doing, Pakistan, and now with the Maldives also. And China is also trying to enhance its own position here, its own influence. As far as India is concerned, India is the closest neighbor to Maldives. So the arrival of an anti-Indian party is a matter of concern, definitely.
Right.
But I think we have to handle it in a sober way, in a sophisticated way, in a nuanced manner. The last point, let me make this, is that India has huge agency also in Maldives. There is a large number of people, there's a huge segment of population in Maldives which is very positively disposed towards India. One example I'll give you. Recently,
Absolutely.
there was the election to the mayor of Male, the position that Moizu occupied before he became the president. And in that, it was the Indian favoring party, India leaning party, the MDP, which won about 44–45%, and Moizu's party won about 29%. So I think there is a huge, groundswell of support for India. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, also the fact, even as you mentioned that, there's also this whole aspect of how there's so much of interdependence between India and Maldives when you talk about the civilian population, particularly for the Maldivians, including just the basic daily necessities as well as the medical supplies. But we'll come to that. Captain Kapil Dev Bell, if I can come to you, if you could just break this down for us. What is so problematic with this research vehicle? And it's not just India. You've had US, you've had Vietnam, you've had Indonesia earlier as well, who've raised concerns over these research vehicles. And all of this coming even, I'll come back to the India-Maldives hydrographic treaty in a bit, but tell us what is basically the issue with this research vessel.
Thank you, Sneha. So, I don't want to undermine the gravity of the situation, but as you very rightly mentioned, she is a research cum survey vessel. She is very modern in the sense that she is a 2016 built, 4,000 GRT, 100-meter length vessel with the latest equipment, and most of this is dual purpose. But I want to step back a little. She is presently indicated in the Sunda Strait region. So now you're aware that there are these 4 entry points into the Indian Ocean. There is the northernmost one is the Malacca Straits, and then we have the Sunda, then we have the Lombok, and then finally the Ombar-Vetar Straits. She is presently stationed very close to Sunda, so which means that she can chart a course directly to Maldives, 2,500 miles away. And interestingly, Hambantota is on the way. So I won't be surprised if there is a stoppage there. But to answer your question about what is this vessel got on board that is of concern. So essentially, these sort of vessels are equipped with the latest in underwater bathymetry surveys, geophysical analysis, and when you couple this with satellite imagery and remote sensing capabilities with GIS, there's a wealth of data. And as you know, today data is really the king of all the information that we can gather. So that, in short, is the concern here. But I have a few more points, and I'll come back to it later when you have time.
Sure. Do you want to briefly mention them before I go to the others for the introductory remarks? Say just a brief of them in 30 seconds, if you could.
Yes. So I would like to, like I said, step back a little bit, and I see this as an alarmist situation, which I don't see this as an alarmist situation. I look upon this as Maldives exercising its own foreign policy, which is something so similar to what India is doing. She wants to chart an independent course, diversify her trade options and security options. The COVID pandemic dealt a serious blow to the tourist industry, and it was a devastating economy for a country that is so dependent. So we can't really blame Maldives for wanting to diversify trade. And I know where China is coming from, so I think I'll stop here.
All right, Major General Dhruv Katoch, at this point, if I can just ask you, when the hydrographic treaty was going on with India, one of the reasons why Maldives has not reviewed that or not renewed that particular treaty, they have said there is concerns for national security, for national safety, and they don't want to really go ahead with that. Now, where are those concerns when you have a Chinese research vessel right at your backyard? Is this a split stand, a dual stand, or is this really Maldives looking to China to counter what it could see the growing distances with India?
Thank you, Shreya. Shreya, as far as Maldives is concerned, you know, its best bet lies with being close to India. That the present president chooses not to do so, I think there may be other reasons involved other than economic and security concerns. I have a feeling that, as you know, one of the things which Chinese do very well is they get hold of the leadership of a particular country and they use allurements. It could be cash or kind or other means to get those people into a favorable position. And if they win an election, then of course they are beholden to the Chinese. So in this particular case, as far as the security, you know, if the Maldives has given the reason as having some security concerns, they had no security concerns with India because we are sharing the information with them and it is going to be used for the benefit of Maldives.
Absolutely.
But with China, I think it's going to be a different kettle of fish altogether. So with China, they will not get the same level of confidence of treatment as they were getting from India. That is one. Number two, the ambassador has very correctly stated that there is a body of opinion within the Maldives public which is very favorable to India. But let me put it in another way. The number of people who are not favorable to India is also very large. And they belong to the radical Islamic mindset. So for India now to try to change that mindset is going to be a very difficult and Herculean task, simply because radicalization within the public has set in to a very large extent. Will that change? Perhaps in time, when the Maldivian people realize that they have taken up a wrong bargain. With India, it is very simple. You see, you're getting all the advantages, you're getting cheaper food. If you're in trouble, India is there to help you. And there is no pressure put by India on the Maldives. But they are going to find a great deal of pressure being put on them by the Chinese. And I think in the times to come, they will rue the decision they are making today. Shreya.
So, Mr. Maroof Raza, if I can get you in. Now, let's just look at the sequence of events that's really happened, starting from the election of the new president of Maldives to what's happened now with the Chinese research vessel. In between, a lot has happened. Chest-thumping nationalism in India, rightly so, after the Prime Minister Modi was abused by the Maldivian ministers, very unprovoked. It was completely unacceptable for an Indian Prime Minister or any country's head to be abused in this manner. But what really ensued was absolute nationalism spilling onto the social media. You've also had how Maldives has demanded for Indian military to be withdrawn from the Maldivian soil, that they've said is something that has been their election promise. They have now said, you know, they have attributed this to the desire of a democracy to be run in a democratic way, saying that India should respect the democratic wishes. Now, looking at all of this in the larger context, it's really quite a challenge for India, considering the strategic importance that Maldives has and the challenge with China that lies.
But let me put it in a different perspective. Firstly, the strategic importance of Maldives is being overplayed. There are 1,192 islands.
All right.
Most of them as small as a colony of Delhi or Mumbai. And so therefore, Maldives, those of us who've been there, hold our breath, hoping that the aircraft that's landing on the runway doesn't run into the sea, because it's so small. Now, the second thing about Maldives is that Maldives has suddenly developed a newborn zeal for projecting itself as a country of strategic importance and as a democracy. You see, China has very little time for Maldives' democratic credentials because China's got its own agenda. So Maldives president has to do what he's doing to fulfill some of his election utterances. But he is not going to be able to wave off the shadow of India that easily. Maldives is still close to India physically as compared to its nearness to other important countries, whether in Southeast Asia or even China. China is really far away. What China is a country with very clear-cut ambition to dominate the Indian Ocean, to show to India that Indian Ocean is not India's ocean anymore. This has been Chinese agenda for at least 8-10 years. And India, I must say, in criticism of the Ministry of External Affairs, that we've been rather blasé about how we responded to Chinese challenge. And we just assume, just like in the case of Nepal and in the case of Maldives, that because they're next door neighbors and they keep getting handouts from India, they'll remain loyal to India. The problem is that we don't have a long-term strategy either for Maldives or our neighborhood. What we have, we react to situations. That had long been a case with Pakistan also, till the Modi government came in and defined the red lines for Pakistan. Now, what is happening here, this research vessel, pardon me, I made the same slip up as you. This research vessel is one that the Chinese are using. It entered the Bay of Bengal some time ago.
Okay, let me just get back to you, Maroof Raza.
Beg your pardon?
Can I just get back to you, Maroof Raza? Let me just get others also to respond to this. Ashok Sajanhar, if I can just come to you. Ashok Sajanhar, now India made a similar request to Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
and Sri Lanka has now brought in a moratorium saying for 1 year, you are not going to have any foreign vessels docking for these purposes in Sri Lanka. That's a move taken by Sri Lanka. Quite contrary to what Maldives has now said, Maldives seems to almost be flexing its muscles. Now, my larger question really is, if you have a problem with an Indian vessel and an Indian treaty, why do you not have a problem with a Chinese research vessel at your backdrop? Secondly, the dynamics of what seems to be challenged, particularly the maritime challenge and diplomacy for India, now seems to be deepening with one, what's happening in the Indian Ocean, two, with what's happening in the Red Sea.
Yeah, I think as far as the Red Sea is concerned, you're right. We have a challenge there, but it's not only India which has a challenge there, it's the whole world that is a challenge there. And we are sort of, working with other countries of the world. Now, as far as Maldives is concerned, let me make one point. That is, it is normally thought that in the heat of the elections, some political parties will make some comments, will make some statements. But when they, the responsibility of the office devolves upon their shoulders, then they will start making some more logical and rational choices. Mr. Moizu has not done that. In fact, after his visit to China, he's become even more aggressive. He's used words like, we'll not allow any country to bully us and all that sort of things. Now, what you said about the Chinese research vessel and Indian hydrographic agreement, I quite agree with you, but you are being logical. But Maldives is not being logical. Maldives is being hypocritical because it wants, it has come on that platform of India out. And that is why it is devising all these arguments that we want for national security, etc. If you permit, I'll just, would like to respond to what Maroof said just now. Normally, I agree with him. But on this question, I do not agree with him at all. I think our neighborhood first policy, as far as our neighboring countries are concerned, he mentioned Nepal, he mentioned this. I think they are our neighborhood policy, first policy, is extremely successful. Since he mentioned Nepal, let me just give you one example. And that is that, you know, when Prime Minister Modi came to power in 2014 and he visited Nepal just after a few months, that was the first visit, bilateral visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Nepal after a gap of 17 years. When the Joint Commission meeting took place in September of 2014, it was the first India-Nepal Joint Commission that took place in 23 years. Now, Mr. Modi has visited Nepal 5 times during the last few years. 2 of them on multilateral visits, 3 of them bilateral visits. I think our relations with Nepal are growing, are improving. You saw the visit of the Nepalese Prime Minister Prachanda to India recently. Also of our External Affairs Minister, we have agreed to their supply of 10,000 megawatt of electricity to India, meaning this is a game-changing sort of a development. So I don't agree with him on that. The other is on the Maldives. I think we don't interfere in any country's election. The elections take place there. I think we have very many cards, Sneha, in our hands. And, you know, if you permit, during the course of the conversation, I'll be happy to say as to what India would need to do. Use a carrot and stick approach. Tell Maldives what are the red lines as far as India is concerned. And I'm sure with very soon,
I have a thing about this, Mr. Sajjanhar, and I'll possibly ask that question during course. This carrot and stick is what's usually worked with the neighborhood and the policies with the neighbors. But that doesn't seem to be quite working out the way it needs to be. Even with Maldives, that's also been the policy in the past as well. But I'll get back to that, Mr. Sajjanhar, and I know I have to get back to Maroof Raza to give his response for a minute. But first, Major General Dhruv Katoch, if I can just come to you, could you just very quickly explain to us, with Maldives maintaining that India needs to withdraw its troops from Maldives, which is, if you look at the total number, seems very small, but then if you look at the total number of troops that Maldives would have, itself is relatively much small to a country. What really are the options that India could have? Now, we understand Maldivian Minister and India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also met recently, but again, this issue came up very strongly. Maldives reiterated this demand. What really are the options before India?
Shreya, I think in this particular case, if Maldives insists on the withdrawal of all Indian armed forces personnel, India will have no option but to withdraw them. Keeping them on the territory of Maldives without their specific consent, I don't think would be appropriate. But the counter to that is, at some point of time, Maldives will run into trouble. And when they run into trouble, who's going to help them? That assistance can only come from India in a particular time frame. Of course, if you extend the time frame, it can come from any part of the world. But if you want an immediate response, then India is the only country which is the first responder, whether it is a HADR mission or a security mission or anything else. So I think the problem goes much deeper than simply the removal of armed forces personnel from Maldives. There is inherently within the Maldives polity as of now, as shown by the president, a very deep radical Islamic mindset. And I think that is playing out now. It is because of the radical Islamic mindset that they are asking for the troops to be out. There is no other reason which really comes to my mind. And I think the Maldivian people will pay very heavily for this mindset, because terrorism, as we have found out in Pakistan, doesn't spare anybody. And the way Pakistan has suffered for promoting terrorism, I think Maldives is the next in line, and they will have nobody to blame but themselves.
No, but if this is the allegation that you're raising, how do you put it in context to it's cozying up with China?
You see, there's a huge difference. China is very far away. India is next door. And when you're looking at the Islamic countries, you will find every single Islamic country has cozied up to China. China doesn't believe in ideology. China believes in money. It throws out money. to get its work done. You look at Pakistan, which is an ideological state. It has got very close ties with China. You don't find any Muslim country criticizing what China has done to the Muslim Uyghur population in Xinjiang. Now, why is that so? So China leaves aside religion and ideology. It's completely out. And they use other means to influence opinions in the Muslim countries. India is different. So I think the terrorism aspect will impact India. It is not going to impact China at all.
Maroof Raza, you also had earlier Ashok Sajjanhar not really agree with you in terms of the neighbor first policy and a very clear policy that India has in this. And I must say I'm also on lines with what Mr. Ambassador Sajjanhar did say, but do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I want to make 3 quick points. Point 1 is just because a country has a large Islamic population and is now taking a stand against India, it will be very immature to turn around and say that because they have terrorist leanings, they've taken a stand against India. Let me also give you an example of Indonesia. Indonesia has a very large population, larger than Pakistan's, but nobody calls them a state that sponsors terrorism. So the second thing is that as far as Maldives goes, Maldives must be treated the same way that China treats countries that have come under its shadow, but then begin to grow wings. Because China can put its foot down very harshly. Now look at the case of debt trap diplomacy. Sri Lanka got a lot of money from China, but when the pandemic happened and Sri Lanka was going broke, China sat quietly. China did not give them any freebies. We gave them $4 billion worth of freebies. Even then, the Sri Lankan president made his first trip to China, not to India. So we've got to learn a few lessons that we need to put our foot down and saying, okay, your joyride is over as far as India is concerned. Now you fend for yourself and you come to us next time, you'll come to us on our terms and conditions. You can't be Mr. Nice Guy to everybody in the neighborhood thinking that's your neighborhood policy. If you're tough with Pakistan, you'll have to be tough with Maldives and maybe even Sri Lanka if they grow wings. And finally, 80 military personnel, they're wanting us to send back. How about sending back the 4 Dornier aircraft and sending up the other coastal boats that we've given? And Maldives armed forces will be left shooting in the air. So we've given them a lot. If they want us out, they should be prepared to have everything out and a bunch of pirates taking over the country like they did in 87, 88 when we had to send in our special forces to reinstate President Goyum's government.
Right. In fact, Maroof Raza, when you're speaking that, we also have the graphics on with those critical timelines when India has really stood by Maldives. But Captain Kapil Dev Bahl, if I could just come to you, with what is happening right now, what do you think would be the immediate change in the strategic challenges that India faces?
Thank you, Sneha. So I'd like to take a step back and continue from where I left off. Our foreign policy can't be knee-jerk reaction to an incident such as this about tourism, etc. We have a very long tradition and relationship with Maldives going to decades. Our merchant marine personnel have trained their seamen. We have designed some of their berths and terminals, not only Malé, but Hulu Malé, Hatatu. So we cannot afford to look at this in a very narrow-minded way. The strategic challenge, of course, is it's a very long-term challenge as far as I see it now. China is not here for the short term. I think this is part of the broader Belt and Road Initiative, and that is why I don't want to blame Maldives for this reaction. There is a lot of money at stake for Maldives. For a country that is undergoing a serious economic challenge, there is global, warming, there is sea level rises. It's a small island nation. They are threatened. They need to diversify the economy. So I see this as a challenge which is long term, which is China wanting to make a Belt and Road, BRI initiative there, which will mean a combination of military come commercial port and airport. That would be unacceptable, and we would have to play this in a way where we continue our long traditions and relationship that we've developed over decades to wean them away. There is no short-term relationship, decision and reaction to this.
Right. Ambassador Sajjana, the last question to you. Do you think the India-Maldives diplomatic ties that as Captain was mentioning, goes back to decades for that matter, has stood the test of time also? Do you think it can stand the weight of the challenges that really seem now being spearheaded by even the elected head of Maldives for that matter?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sneha, for that question. I don't have the slightest doubt that Indian diplomacy and Indian foreign policy will be able to very effectively deal with this challenge. Let me tell the previous speaker, India has not acted in a knee-jerk fashion. You look at what the response of the Indian government has been. When all these, three deputy ministers came up with these absolutely unacceptable remarks on India and on the Indian Prime Minister, what did we do? We did not make any public statement. All the statements in social media were coming from the ordinary people of the country and celebrities of the country. What we did was we summoned the High Commissioner of Maldives and told him what needed to be told to him. Then we had this meeting of the two foreign ministers on the sidelines of the NAM summit in Kampala. India has not made any obvious statement in the public domain. So we are treating it very, very, in closed door through diplomacy. We are not acting like what even President Moizu has said, that we will not be bullied, this is not any one country's ocean, etc. We don't want to take it. I think we can definitely handle this situation. And as the time passes, I'm sure we will need to tell the red lines, draw the red lines as far as Moizu is concerned. Last point, let me tell you, when we are talking about security personnel, there are 77 of them, and they are not really security, they are not military. They are there to operate these helicopters and Dornier aircraft, basically which are for humanitarian assistance and medical evacuation. They are not for, 77 is not a big number to have to create any sense of insecurity or to create any threat to any self-respecting governments. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us and trying and explaining this very complex situation. Of course, the days ahead will be very testing to see how India responds and how Maldives responds. But it's also not going to be just a challenge in isolation. There are so many changes to maritime security and global challenges also as India emerges as the voice for the global south. These are very complex issues, and at Mirror Now, we will try our best to bring out the nuances. Thank you very much for joining us on this topic. It's time for a short break. On the other side, we'll bring you all the latest, a wrap of all the big news throughout the day.